What up, watch peeps? This watch is a hotbed of controversy. So let me make one thing clear right up front. This watch is not a value proposition. Newsflash, none of the cool watches are. Its value is not a sum of your spec sheet checklist, although it delivers in that department as well. This watch is an awesomeness proposition, and there is a whole horde of people willing to pay what they're asking because it delivers on the awesomeness. And then there's the sentiment that it is a Daytona ripoff. I mean, we're calling it the Saytona after all. But is it? Let's find out. I'm Pete, and we are Chillin' with Watches. Wrist check threw on this Skirfa that I just recently got in to check it out for a little bit. Super cool watch. I'll get a review on this one up soon. But for now, we're here to see this bad boy. First thing you'll notice is no fancy packaging or box here or anything. This is not a limited or special edition. This is just another Seiko, but one that people are very excited about. And you look at that. That is one gorgeous watch. I have been wearing this thing non-stop. I'm crushing so hard on this one. But you look at this particular model and you think, boy, that looks like a Daytona. My question is, why? First, let's look at the bezel. Now, the Daytona has a very flat bezel, whereas the Seiko has this kind of field watch shaped two-part bezel that is sloped on the sides. It's a tacky bezel? Sure, but the majority of chronos are. But in this case, even the markings are very different. Let's look at the dial. Again, these aren't really very similar when you look at them. They're both white, sure, but that's about it. The Daytona has rings around the registers, whereas the Seikos are solid black. The Seiko has a smaller register at 6 o'clock, whereas the Daytona's registers are all the same size. Now, are the subdials all at 3, 6, and 9 o'clock? Yes, but is any chronograph with registers in these locations a Daytona ripoff? If yes, then okay, this one is too, but I personally don't think that's fair. Now, the Daytona has silver indices, whereas if you look closely on the Seiko, these actually are black indices. They're similar shape, but is that enough to call it a ripoff? Now, the Daytona uses stick hands, whereas the Seiko here, if you'll take a look, uses sword hands. Not all that similar other than that they're both straight, but most chronographs use straight hands as anything else will tend to block out too much of the registers. So for me, it's not the dial, it's not the hands, it's not the bezel, so what else? Is it the case? Most definitely not. The Daytona uses an oyster case, and the Seiko's case is a lot more like the 62 MAS with these simple rounded lugs, kind of straight cut at the case and straight cut at the end of the lugs as well. Now, the Daytona has crown guards and screw down pushers, where the Seiko has neither. So the cases, in conclusion, are really very different. Is it the bracelet? The Seiko uses more of a president style bracelet versus the Daytona's oyster. They're not at all the same. The Seiko does have really nice solid links, solid end links, and a really nice milled out clasp that is a nice upgrade from some other Seiko models in this price range. So at this point, if you're thinking it's the vintage Paul Newman Daytona that this is a ripoff of and not the modern Daytona, well, that's a more interesting proposition, and I think it's at the heart of the matter here. But if you look at these two watches, they have all the same differences as a modern Rolex, if not more, with the exception of neither the Seiko nor the Paul Newman having crown guards. But I think this watch is so iconic that whenever we see a panda dial with registers at 3, 6, 9 o'clock, our brains, without thinking, call forth the Paul Newman Daytona and conclude, boom, that's a ripoff. Because the Seiko Speedmaster also comes in a blue and a black version, and neither of those really make me think Daytona when I first look at them. Price-wise, these retail at $675. Trust me, I know the dance of coming up with criticisms or nitpicks about a watch to justify my not buying it all too well. I do it all the time. But in this case, I have zero regrets about paying full retail for this watch. All right, now that that's settled, let's go over the details. Going over the dimensions, I measured it at a 39.5 millimeter case with a 45.4 millimeter lug to lug. For me, it came in at 13.4 millimeters thick, and it has a 20 millimeter lug width. Going over some of the other specs, it has a very nice single domed sapphire crystal. Kind of gives you a little distortion and magnification effect. It uses Seiko LumiBrite. There's not very much on the dial. It is not a lume monster by any means as compared to most Seiko divers. Now, it is running the V192 solar chronograph movement. It is not a mecha quartz movement, and it has 100 meters of water resistance. And on this bracelet, sized for my 7¼ inch wrist, it came in at a very reasonable 151 grams. All right, let's take a look at it on wrist. And here's how it wears on my 7¼ inch wrist. Again, one of the nicest wearing watches I have picked up this year. I find it very comfortable. I love the size. I love the way it wears. Really nice turn down to the lugs. It hugs the wrist shape. Great minimal clasp on it, and really nice solid feeling links to the bracelet as well. Let's take a look at it side by side some other watches. I don't have a lot of chronographs to compare this with, but here it is next to the Woolbrick or the Douglas Mecha Quartz chronograph, which comes in at 40 millimeters at the bezel. So again, these two have a very similar size, and you'll see they even have that very similar case shape. The 62 MAS is a very skin diver case shape, and you'll see that this Douglas utilizes that as well. I think a really good comparison here, these two watches. All right, let's take a look at it next to the Tudor Black Bay, another 39 millimeter watch. Now, for me, this one, the Seiko came in a ½ millimeter larger, but I think they wear very similar, both great sizes, really comfortable on the wrist. Even the thickness wise, now the Black Bay is maybe minimally thinner, but not by a whole lot. And lastly, always baseline comparison, the SKX, about 42.5 millimeters. So you got a few millimeters size on it there, and I think you can see that in the bulkier SKX case. All right, now I told you there wasn't a whole lot of lume on this thing, but let's see what there is.
Keep the lume.
And there you go. I told you there was not a whole lot of lume on this one. But basically you're limited to the hands and the cardinal points on the dial. But what lume there is quite bright and has a really nice aqua color glow to it. So there it is, the new Seiko Speedtimer Solar. My conclusion, does it look like a Daytona? In so much as the registers are in the same location, yes. Is it a Daytona ripoff? Not at all. Do I care if you still think it is? Even less. All joking aside, it is a cool watch. It feels great on wrist, it feels premium, and it looks awesome. I'm in love. All right, before I let you go, sneaker check. I'm wearing my Jordan 3s, and that's it. I'm out. If it's not too much trouble, please like, subscribe, and come back next time. Peace.